Welcome to the Nourish to Thrive podcast, faith-forward, science-backed strategies for women who want more energy, less weight, and real answers. I'm your host, Tanya Pennington-Miller, a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and functional blood chemistry specialist with a master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. If you're tired of feeling dismissed by your doctor, confused by your labs, and stuck in survival mode, you're in the right place. Here, we simplify the science. We get to the root, and we anchor it all in truth. Because God made your body to heal and thrive, not just survive. It just needs the right kind of support and less noise. Hello, my friend. Welcome into the Nourish to Thrive podcast. I am so glad you're back with me today. Over the last several weeks, we have been building a conversation layer by layer. And we started with the nervous system. We moved on to hormones, then to metabolism. And on the most recent episode, we talked behavior. So today, we're bringing those pieces together because this is often where things feel the most discouraging for women. Trying to sustain consistency when the system is already carrying more than it realizes. Most women don't struggle with consistency because they don't care or because they don't know what to do. They struggle because some days feel supportive and others don't. There are days where eating well feels natural. Like you're thinking, why don't I always do this, right? Like movement fits. We do the workout and we think, oh my gosh, why am I not doing this every day? Sleep comes easier. And then there are days where nothing obvious changed, but everything feels harder to maintain. What's often misunderstood is that consistency doesn't just disappear on its own. It fades when the rhythm that supported it breaks down. We've been taught to think of consistency as something that you apply more pressure to, something that you tighten up when it starts slipping, right? But consistency usually forms when the body knows what to expect. When the day has a shape it can settle into, when there's enough predictability for the system to stop bracing and to start cooperating. And I want you to stick with me on this idea, okay? We are going to talk about rhythm today, not as a schedule or a set of rules necessarily, but as the foundation that consistency actually rests on. Because this is where sustainable change takes root, not through discipline or drive or motivation, but through patterns the body can work with. For a long time, willpower has been treated as the solution to consistency, right? Like if you just want it badly enough, or if you can just stay disciplined, if you can just push through the resistance, then consistency should follow. But willpower quietly assumes a few things that usually are not true. It assumes that you have steady energy day to day. It assumes your capacity is relatively stable. It assumes your days are predictable enough to support repeated effort. And for most women, that's just not how real life works. Like our energy fluctuates, sleep gets interrupted, emotional load changes week to week. Meals sometimes happen later than planned, or sometimes they just get skipped altogether. And some days just carry more responsibility than others. When life doesn't have much rhythm, our behavior becomes reactive. We're responding to the day instead of moving through it with any kind of support underneath. Now, in those moments, willpower can help briefly. It can get you through a busy stretch. It can bridge a short season, but it was never meant to be the thing holding everything together long term. And this is why so many women can point to a time when something worked for them. Let's say a 21-day detox, maybe a 6-week plan, or maybe even a 12-week program, right? But the results didn't last. See, during those windows, willpower carried you through. There was a clear start, a clear stop, a defined structure, a lot of mental energy holding it all together. And so for a time that can work, but once the structure is gone and life resumes its usual demands, there's nothing underneath the behavior to support it. Willpower works in bursts. Rhythm, what we're talking about today, is what carries you across seasons. And when consistency keeps falling apart, it's rarely because willpower is missing. It's usually because there's nothing steady underneath the day for that behavior to rest on. Now, when I use the word rhythm, I want to be clear that I'm not talking about a schedule that you follow perfectly or a routine that you execute the same way every day. Okay, rhythm is so much more simple than that. It's the order and the timing that your body starts to recognize and rely on. It's when you tend to eat. It's how your day usually begins. It's whether effort and recovery take turns, or whether effort just keeps stacking on top of effort. Whether rest shows up with any regularity, or is it only when you're exhausted enough to crash, like you've hit a wall, so now you'll rest? So rhythm is less about what you do and more about how consistently your body knows what's coming next. And this is important because the body doesn't need perfection. It just needs predictability, predictable nourishment, predictable pauses, predictable cues that say you're not about to be pulled in 10 different directions at once. And when those cues exist, even loosely, the nervous system can settle. Hormones can communicate more clearly. Metabolism doesn't have to stay on high alert. And this is why rhythm matters so much more than rules. Rules ask the body to comply, while rhythm tells the body it's safe enough to engage. And when the body feels that sense of physiological safety, behavior starts to stabilize without being forced. Hallelujah. Rhythm is what tells the body you are safe here. You can settle in. Now, I think one of the most overlooked benefits of rhythm is how much effort it quietly removes. When the day has some shape to it, a lot of things start to happen without you trying to make them happen. Hunger cues become more clear. So you're not constantly guessing like, should I eat right now? Should I put it off? Do I wait till I'm depleted? Energy feels more even instead of swinging from one extreme to the other. Decisions don't feel as heavy because fewer things require active thought. So behavior starts to feel easier. And it's not because you're more motivated, but it's because the body isn't spending all day compensating. When rhythm is missing, the opposite tends to happen. Every decision takes effort. When we eat, whether to move, how hard to push, when to rest. Like nothing is anchored, so everything requires negotiation. And that's when follow-through starts to feel fragile because the system is already carrying too much. So this is really about load reduction. When the body doesn't have to keep scanning for what is next, it has more capacity to participate. Less energy gets spent navigating your day. More energy becomes available to actually live it. That's when consistency begins to show up. You didn't force it, but now it's something that feels sustainable. Now, I want to share with you what the rhythm of my day looks like. And not because it is something that you should copy. In fact, you shouldn't copy it. But I just want to give you an example of how rhythm can take shape in real life. This is simply what works for me right now in this season, okay? If you had asked me 6 months ago, this wasn't my rhythm. And 6 months from now, it might not be my rhythm. For me, my rhythm starts first thing in the morning. I'm usually up around 5 and I don't rush straight into productivity. Now, in my natural state, if I allowed myself to, I would, okay, because I really actually do enjoy working. So I'm very intentional about not doing that. So there's a sequence that my body has come to expect. I start with my lemon salt water. Then I move on to my mushroom coffee. And it's worth noting that my coffee is only about 45 milligrams of caffeine, and it includes both collagen and an egg yolk. And if you're looking at me funny right now, egg yolk is amazing in a cup of coffee. You just have to froth it in there, and it is the creamiest cup you've ever had. So So there's nourishment in my cup of coffee. Even though I'm not sitting down to breakfast quite yet, I am getting some nourishment into my system. From there, my mornings are pretty quiet. I spend time with Jesus. I do a few minutes of vagus nerve support, and then I fill out my planner for the day. And I ease into work before my daughter wakes up during this time. And she usually wakes up around 8. So it's more of this steady on-ramp rather than this jolt right when I get out of bed, right? And my body responds really well to this. Now, once the house wakes up, the rhythm shifts. I've got to get the dogs fed. Breakfast happens around the same window most days, usually around 8:30. My body knows that food is coming, so there's no urgency building in the background. And that's a place where my rhythm flexes a little bit compared to what I might recommend for somebody else, compared to maybe what you have heard me recommend for you. I generally encourage eating breakfast within an hour or two of waking. I personally take a little bit longer to sit down to breakfast. It's about 3 to 3.5 hours for me before I'm eating breakfast. However, I've already given my body some protein and some fat in my coffee, right? So I'm not running on empty. And then mid-morning is when movement fits in best for me. So some days that's a workout. Other days that's a walk, sometimes inside or outside, depending on the weather, or even just depending on what my body has to give that day. And then lunch comes around midday, let's say noonish, okay? My afternoons have a pretty defined container depending on the day. My office hours are either 12 to 3 or 1 to 4, somewhere around there. And that boundary matters more than you might realize because I know when I'm working. Like my nervous system doesn't have to keep scanning all day, wondering when work's going to happen or when it's going to end, right? When those hours are done, I can be present with my daughter instead of half working, half parenting at the same time, right? Without that 3-hour block, my mind is always thinking about what I need to get done for work. When am I going to be able to do it? I have this deadline coming up, right? But knowing that I've got 3 hours to get it done, I can really just compartmentalize it. And then my evenings really slow down, like on purpose. Dinner is made and eaten a little bit earlier, maybe than normal. I usually start cooking dinner around 5. We're done by 6 eating. A shower is part of my wind down after dinner. And then bedtime lands somewhere between 8 and 8:30 most nights. Now, this day is not rigid, okay? Life still happens, but there's a rhythm that my body recognizes. And because so many things happen in roughly the same order most days, I'm not spending energy constantly deciding when should I eat? When should I move? When should I stop? Right? Like I don't have to ask myself, am I hungry right now? Should I wait? I could eat now. Maybe I'll wait till after. I don't go through any of that. I know like right now is when I'm going to eat. And that's the piece I want you to hear. Rhythm isn't about copying somebody else's schedule. It's about giving your body a day it can anticipate. And when the body knows what's coming, when effort and recovery have some predictability, behavior starts to feel easier without being forced. Over time, this rhythm has become almost automatic for me. It's like brushing my teeth. There isn't stress around it because my body knows what to expect. And I also know this will change, right? As my daughter gets older, some days are going to look different. Every season does. So the point isn't to lock in to one routine forever. It's to find a rhythm that fits the season that you are in right now. When rhythm is inconsistent, the body usually lets you know by some familiar patterns. You might skip meals earlier in the day telling yourself you're fine, but then you feel kind of out of control with food later on. Mornings might get pushed, right? You might do this with caffeine, running on adrenaline. And then your afternoons feel heavy and foggy, or maybe just kind of flat. Weekdays become about pushing through, just getting through. And then weekends might swing in the other direction, either doing nothing at all, or just feeling, kind of getting down on yourself for feeling like you've just fallen off altogether. Some weeks you might feel fairly on. Other weeks, everything feels harder, even though nothing obvious has changed. Motivation gets labeled as the problem in these scenarios, when what's really missing is recovery. The body is asking for relief and not more pressure. And listen, I got this wrong for so many years. I would just push through. I am a driven person, right? I'm going to make it happen. I might not feel motivated today, but darn it, I'm going to look like I am, right? These patterns are not personal shortcomings. They're signals that the day doesn't yet have a shape that the body can rely on. When rhythm is missing, behavior becomes reactive. When rhythm starts to form, behavior stabilizes, often effortlessly. And that's the shift that we're after. So building a rhythm doesn't start with doing everything differently, okay? It starts small. Often it begins with just eating breakfast around the same time most days, eating lunch around the same time most days. Same with dinner. Not down to the minute, but consistently enough that the body isn't guessing. It might look like protecting one anchor in the day, okay? Maybe a morning that isn't rushed. Start there. Can't do that right now? Maybe it's an evening that actually winds down before you get into bed. Can't do that right now? Maybe it's turning work off when it's time to turn work off. Find something, find one thing. And it means being intentional about alternating effort and rest instead of stacking demand on top of demand until the day collapses. And rhythms should also flex with the season that you're in. Busy seasons usually need simpler rhythms, fewer decisions to make, more predictability, lower expectations for output. But slower seasons can tolerate more structure, more planning, more intentional building. So you really want to assess what season you're in. Problems tend to show up when expectations don't match our capacity, when the rhythm of the day asks more than the system has to give. Consistency grows when rhythm adjusts to what the body can actually support. And now I can hear some of you thinking, but Tanya, I've heard you talking about fasting and that we shouldn't be fasting the same way every day. Like, how does this fit in with rhythm? Now you're telling me to eat at roughly the same time each day. And here's how I like to think about it. Fasting can be incredibly supportive in the right season. Recovery, enough stability that it will benefit from those longer gaps. And then there are seasons where those same gaps instead add strain instead of resilience. So rhythm isn't about forcing one approach year-round. It's about matching the pattern of the day to the season that the body is actually in. So in higher demand seasons, we're talking more stress, less sleep, heavier emotional or physical load. Rhythm usually looks simpler, more predictable nourishment, shorter gaps, clearer signals of safety. In slower or more stable seasons, the body often tolerates or sometimes even benefits from more flexibility with timing, longer fasting windows, fewer meals, different pacing. So it's choosing a rhythm that the body can sustain in this season and being willing to adjust when the season changes. That's how fasting becomes a tool instead of a stressor. And that's how rhythm supports consistency rather than undermining it. And you may have noticed, listening to my daily rhythm, that I naturally go about 15 hours between dinner and when I sit down to breakfast in the morning. That window is not coming from skipping breakfast or pushing through hunger. It's simply the result of eating dinner earlier, sleeping, and then starting my day in a way that isn't rushed or depleted. And this distinction is really important, especially for women in midlife, women like you and I. From a physiological standpoint, an overnight fast created by an earlier dinner tends to work with the body and not against it. Insulin sensitivity naturally declines later in the day, so we become more insulin resistant later in the day. So closing the eating window earlier often supports better blood sugar control overnight and more stable metabolic response overall. And P.S., better sleep. Okay. Morning nourishment, on the other hand, helps to set the tone for the day. It supports cortisol rhythm. It reduces the need for compensation later. It often makes appetite and energy feel more predictable throughout the day. That's very different from morning fasting driven by pressure, or maybe even just by habit for that matter. For many women, especially in higher demand seasons, skipping food earlier in the day asks your body to produce energy before it feels fully supported, and that can backfire. So this is why evening fasting often feels more sustainable for fat loss in midlife. Yes, evening fasting is more sustainable for fat loss in midlife. It allows the body to access stored energy during rest and recovery without asking the nervous system to stay on high alert. So again, this isn't about hitting a specific fasting number. It's about choosing a rhythm that supports weight regulation without creating more strain. And just like everything else we've talked about, the rhythm may change with the season that we are in. And remember, we are going to get credit for what it is that we do most of the time. So you don't want to get caught up in this rhythm. Like, here's my daily rhythm. Here's what I usually do. Gosh, today has been completely off. That's okay. Because you're getting credit for what it is that you most often do, not the things that you do once in a while. This weekend, we are taking off for my birthday. It's my birthday weekend. And I'm probably going to end up eating dinner later than my normal window that I eat dinner in. That's okay. Because that's not what I do most of the time. Okay, so I say this because it's easy to then start to get caught up in what our rhythm is supposed to be. Okay. You know, something that keeps coming into focus for me as we talk about rhythm is how deeply the body responds to order it can rely on. Not rigidity, not control, just enough structure to feel what's coming next. That kind of design doesn't feel accidental to me. Like, I see God's wisdom woven through it. Daily bread wasn't about having too much or too little. It was about trust, right? Provision for today and confidence that tomorrow would come. Rest was not a reward. It was part of the rhythm that Jesus modeled, because constant output was never the goal. Our bodies still follow that same design. They don't settle under pressure. They settle when nourishment is steady, when rest is expected, and the pace allows for life. That's the shift here. From forcing consistency to allowing it to grow as trust replaces pressure. Trust in God's design and trust that the body responds when the environment supports it. So next week, we're going to finish this stretch of conversations by talking about how supports long-term healing. That's what we're looking for, right? Long-term results. And why the body responds to what's consistent over time and not what's pushed all at once. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking about your own patterns, your energy, your consistency, the way your days are structured, enrollment for the DNA Reset for Fat Loss Academy is opening soon. Okay, at the end of this month. This is February 2026. So inside the academy, we look at your DNA alongside comprehensive lab testing, hormones, thyroid, metabolic markers, stress physiology, on and on. So we can see how your body is wired to respond. And from there, we create a personalized roadmap so that you're no longer asking your body to change without the support it actually needs. So you can join the waitlist through the link in my show notes. And listen, space is limited in the academy. There's a lot of lab interpretation for me to do, so I can only accept so many women. So get yourself on the waitlist if you want to hear more about it, okay? And as you move through the next few days, see if there's one place in your day that could feel a little more predictable, just something your body can rely on. Because, sister, you don't need more willpower. You need a day that your body can settle into. I'll meet you right back here next week. That's it for today on the Nourish to Thrive podcast. If you found value here, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or send it to someone who's walking a similar path. Keep showing up, keep asking questions, and know that healing is possible. especially when you trust the one who designed your body to heal. Until next time, stay rooted in truth and nourished in grace.